you've been a close ally of Boris Johnson's in the past. None of the criticisms that you level at him are remotely new. So either some blinkers have fallen off, or where once you gave the benefit of the doubt, now you are not minded to do so.
Well, I think that it's a combination of all of these things. I think that, it's very important to acknowledge that, Boris has qualities. He has likability. He's quite fun to be around. I happen to think that he was a good candidate and even a pretty good mayor of London, because it's not, frankly, a job which has enormous responsibilities. I mean, obviously, it does have important responsibilities. Nothing on the scale of being foreign secretary as he was or prime minister.
Sure.
But I think he's totally unfit and unqualified to be prime minister, and that's partly because he is an entirely amoral figure. He has no commitment to cause, to any belief, to anything other than the promotion of Boris Johnson. And while, you're basically comedian in chief as Mayor of London, maybe that's okay. But it's really not okay when you are leading the nation through one of its most difficult periods. And the reality is we can't rely on anything he says. Nigel Farage has just stood down half of the Brexit Party candidates based on a promise that Boris Johnson supposedly gave in a video about not extending the transition. Now, all of us, now have to hope that Boris Johnson is going to betray Nigel Farage, just like he's betrayed everybody else in his life.
I mean, I appreciate you prefaced everything that you just said with the words "I think," but for anybody under any illusion, then during this period of broadcasting purdah, I should stress that this is entirely your opinion, and it would no doubt be refuted and rejected by many other observers, not least Boris Johnson. But how do you make sense of it? Because I know when you crossed the floor, it was a moment of genuine emotion and a sense that you almost couldn't quite believe where you'd found yourself.
No, that's a very good way of putting it. That is exactly the case. And I think, I've been having lots of conversations with David Gauke and Justine Greening and, lots of other people, Ken Clarke, over the last few months. And I think we all feel it. We all feel like we knew this party, and we didn't love every bit of it, and we didn't agree with everyone in it, but we sort of knew that we had a place in it. And suddenly that has disappeared, and it is baffling and discombobulating. And as you say, there are a similar group of people in the Labour movement who feel similarly sort of stranded, beached.
Another former minister, actually, of course, Ian Austin. He had left the party, but prior to that, he held office. How? I mean, on a personal level, why not just keep quiet? Because I know that you've said you intend to vote for the Liberal Democrats. David Gauke is going to run as an independent. But various other some of the people that you mentioned are not walking away from the fray. But you know that there are still people in the Conservative Party who share your views or who are closer to you than some of the sort of ERG types, I suppose, that Johnson is currently wooing. Why not just keep quiet? What is it that propels you into public statements?
Well, I mean, I've been an MP for 9.5 years. I've been in and around politics for nearly 20. I'm a bit of a loudmouth. That's what we all are. I sort of, want to get things off my chest, want to express myself. But perhaps in particular, because I decided, and it was a very difficult decision, but because I decided ultimately not to run this election, I didn't want people to feel that I was just slinking away and, submitting to the inevitable and maybe, biting my tongue because that might get me some big appointment or a place in the House of Lords or something like that in due course. That would really appall me if people thought that I was shrinking from the fight. And I just think that maybe I now have to fight the fight in a different way, in a different forum than I was able to as a member of Parliament.
I mean, you speak for a lot of people when you write it will be recorded as the only election in modern times in which you wouldn't trust either of the prime ministerial candidates to mind your children for an hour, let alone run the country. Final question, I promise, and it may not be one that any of us are actually qualified to answer yet. But this astonishing parting of the ways, this abandonment of the centre ground, the personalities of these two leaders aside, or personal failings aside, what they represent politically is the abandonment of the political territory that has pretty much been the only constant in post-war British politics. How do you think that has happened? Where would, if you were a historian, perhaps with a little bit more perspective, what would you point at as key reasons for this?
Well, I think it's quite important that we recognise that we're not alone in this. This is not only happening in the United Kingdom. This is happening in America, but not just in America. It's happening in Brazil. It's happening in Turkey. It's happening in the Philippines. It's happening all over the world, and certainly happening in almost every European country. Now, there are cases, obviously, and the election of Emmanuel Macron is the best example of this. There are cases where the centre has sort of reasserted itself. But he, was very lucky. Very bold and very brilliant, but also very lucky, and took maximum advantage of the French political system. In our political system, it is much harder. And while I'm pretty certain that you could probably gather a larger number of people to support a range of sort of centre ground positions, our electoral system doesn't make it easy. As Joe Swinson and David Gauke running as an independent, and others are in the process of finding out that there is this enormous pressure to either back Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party, or Boris Johnson and the Tory Party, even if they go off to one extreme or other. And when both of them are doing it at the same time, and that is unusual, normally, one's had one party being vaguely sensible while the other one went, off on a slightly nutty frolic of its own. Now you've got both of them doing that, but it's very hard for the centre ground to break through. And I fear that until we have a proper sort of reform of our political system and a reform of our electoral system, it will always be very, very hard to do.